Fashion was the worst possible place to be if you were a leftist feminist. It was horrid. Now, that's not a quote from some outside critic or a harsh cultural commentator. Those are the exact words of Miuccia Prada herself, describing her own very real, deep-seated disdain for the exact industry she works in. For a long time, she was actively ashamed of her profession. She genuinely thought the whole business of creating luxury clothes was intellectually suspect, frivolous, and just fundamentally opposed to her core values. But then you contrast that deep-seated shame with the reality of her empire today. 5.7 billion euros. That is the jaw-dropping annual revenue of the Prada Group as of 2025. The company she once completely refused to run is now pulling in billions worldwide, up 9% from the year before, totally defying global economic slowdowns that have hobbled so many other massive fashion houses. So here's the massive paradox we're exploring today. How exactly does a card-carrying communist with absolutely zero interest in clothes end up rebuilding one of the most recognized, highly profitable names in luxury? How on earth do you build a multi-billion-dollar global empire out of something you fundamentally despise? Well, to understand that, we have to look at exactly where she started.
Section 1. The Reluctant Heir. Back in the 1970s, Miuccia had built an entire identity in direct opposition to wealth and consumer capitalism. Her early life was wildly far removed from the world of luxury goods. She was a serious academic, earning a PhD in political science. She literally spent 5 years training to disappear, performing as a silent mime on the stages of Milan's Piccolo Teatro, a deeply artistic, anti-commercial pursuit. And while her family worried about leather margins and retail sales, she was out on the streets. She was marching in demonstrations, distributing Communist Party pamphlets, and dedicating her time to the 1970s Milan women's rights movement. She was an intellectual radical in every sense of the word. But, families don't always care about your political convictions. By 1978, the state of the family business was pretty dire. Prada was originally founded by her grandfather Mario in 1913, a man who, quite ironically, never wanted women involved in the business at all. But by the late 70s, the brand was totally drifting. It had devolved into a fading family leather shop in Milan with a mere $450,000 in annual sales. The magic was just gone. So at 29 years old, feeling obligated to her family rather than willing, Miuccia took the reins. She had no marketing team, no formal design team, just old ledgers, heavy leather samples, and her own profound doubts about what she was doing with her life. Section 2. Inventing ugly chic.
Now, you really cannot tell the Prada story without bringing in Patrizio Bertelli. He's a man Miuccia met at a leather goods trade fair in 1977, who would eventually become her husband and co-CEO. Their dynamic was this unlikely, friction-filled partnership that laid the absolute foundation for her success. Think of it like this. Miuccia was the visionary, cerebral, highly political, and instinctively suspicious of commerce and traditional marketing. Bertelli, on the other hand, was aggressive, endlessly obsessed with operations, and just commercially ruthless. This contrasting division of labor was absolutely crucial. It allowed Miuccia to focus entirely on the intellectual and aesthetic soul of the brand, while Bertelli built the unglamorous, highly efficient machinery, the manufacturing, the complex supply chains, the aggressive retail expansion that was required to actually turn her anti-fashion concepts into a scalable global business.
That dynamic? It completely paved the way for their first massive breakthrough. In 1979, Miuccia spots a tough, black military parachute fabric, nylon. It was a purely industrial material. It had absolutely zero prestige in the luxury world. It took a few years to really catch on, but by 1984, she releases the Prada Vela backpack, made entirely out of this utilitarian fabric. A year later, in 1985, she slaps on that now iconic inverted metal triangle logo. Through sheer force of design conviction, she took a cheap, durable fabric and made restraint itself a status symbol. By the 1990s, this backpack defied literally all the conventional marketing rules of the era. Instead of shouting with loud gold hardware, heavy leathers, or flashy monograms, it whispered. It became the ultimate anti-status symbol for the intellectual elite. Then, in 1988, she launched Prada's first women's ready-to-wear collection. She radically dropped waistlines, used muted, drab colors, and completely avoided obvious sex appeal. Her philosophy during this era was super clear. Ugly is attractive, ugly is exciting. Maybe because it is newer, the investigation of ugliness is to me more interesting than the bourgeois idea of beauty. She was literally taking her political instincts, that deep suspicion of anything too easy, too pretty, or complicit with traditional power structures, and smuggling them directly into the seams of her clothing. She made high fashion intellectually demanding. She forced the consumer to think about why they even found something beautiful in the first place.
Section 3. Crushed by ambition.
But hey, unprecedented, meteoric success always brings an entirely new set of problems, right? Flush with cash in the late 90s, Prada tried to aggressively copy the LVMH conglomerate model with a massive acquisition spree. In 1999 alone, they bought a 25.5% stake in Fendi for $241 million, snapped up the minimalist label Helmut Lang, and acquired Jill Sander. But man, it was a financial and cultural disaster in slow motion. Jill Sander actually left her own namesake brand almost immediately due to explosive clashes with Bertelli's hard-charging management style. Helmut Lang struggled immensely under the new ownership. They very quickly learned that Prada's idiosyncratic, singular creative culture simply could not scale across multiple different design houses with all their varying creative egos.
And the result of all that overextension is a truly staggering number. 1.7 billion euros in debt by November of 2001. Just to put that into perspective, that figure was remarkably close to the company's entire annual revenue for that single year. Everything Miuccia and Bertelli had painstakingly built over 2 decades was suddenly at severe risk of completely collapsing under the weight of their own aggressive corporate expansion. They were drowning in debt and just bleeding cash.
Section 4. The Hong Kong pivot. So they had to painfully sell off those newly acquired brands just to survive the immediate crisis. But to actually get back to growth, they needed a brilliant, highly unconventional financial solution. By the late 2000s, rather than listing their company in traditional luxury strongholds like Milan, New York, or London, they made a massive bet. In June 2011, Prada became the first Italian company ever to list on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, raising a crucial $2.1 billion. It was an incredibly strategic, forward-looking bet on the rising Asian luxury market and the rapidly growing base of Chinese consumers. That vital infusion of capital paid down their remaining debt and allowed them to sensibly, methodically expand their own 2 core brands. They honestly came out of the crisis leaner and so much stronger.
Section 5. A complicated legacy. Now, it's absolutely vital we look at the entire picture of this legacy, which definitely includes profound public failures. In December 2018, Prada faced severe and totally justified public backlash over their Prada Melia line, which featured figurines that clearly evoked deeply racist, slaveried-era caricatures. Miuccia, a designer who was widely celebrated for her deep political and social consciousness, initially gave a defensive, tone-deaf response to the media, questioning how a designer can be expected to know all cultures. This heavily damaged public trust. Ultimately, the company reached a serious settlement with the New York City Commission on Human Rights, resulting in mandatory racial equity training and long-term external oversight for the brand. It was a deeply humbling moment where a founder fundamentally failed to uphold the very progressive values she claimed to champion. Yet just a year later, we see another facet of her complex values put into practice, showing a brand trying to correct its course. In 2019, Prada launched Re-Nylon. The very parachute material that started her revolution 40 years earlier was now the centerpiece of a massive commitment to transition the brand's entire nylon supply chain to regenerated, recycled ocean plastics and industrial waste. It was a sweeping environmental initiative, and really, her attempt to make the whole machinery of consumer capitalism just a little more thoughtful, circular, and responsible.
And financially, her modernized strategy of focusing strictly on her core strengths has paid off monumentally. For the 2025 fiscal year, the core Prada brand alone accounts for over 4 billion euros, but equally impressive is Miu Miu. The younger, slightly more rebellious sister brand that Miuccia launched back in 1993 is pulling in nearly 1.2 billion euros all on its own. It has completely cemented itself as one of the fastest growing and most culturally relevant luxury labels on the planet right now. Which, of course, gave them the unprecedented financial power to make an unbelievable culture-shifting move. In December 2025, Prada acquired its longtime Milan rival Versace for 1.25 billion euros. Just think about the sheer irony of that for a second. Back in the 90s, these were the 2 absolute opposite poles of fashion. And now, the cerebral, famously minimalist brand has quite literally swallowed Milan's loudest, most flamboyant, unapologetically maximalist house. It is a stunning, undeniable victory for Miuccia's understated vision of luxury. So, how did the woman who used to be so ashamed of her career reconcile all of this? She eventually said this: "Finally, I am proud of it. I used to be ashamed of it because I was educated, I was a feminist, but finally I am proud of it. I earn my own money, which is a huge thing for a woman." She ultimately reframed her immense commercial success right through the lens of independence and labor. She never stopped being a communicator of her ideals. She just changed her medium from picket signs in the streets of Milan to global runway shows. Which brings us to a final, really provocative thought to wrap up this explainer. She built a massive empire using exactly the parts of herself the fashion world never expected to see: her intellect, her politics, and her profound skepticism. But when we look back at the young girl handing out communist flyers in the 1970s, and then look at the billionaire mogul of 2025 who just bought out Versace, we have to ask, did the communists conquer capitalism, or did capitalism simply commodify and conquer the communists? It's a fascinating question, and the answer is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer.